All right, my name is Dr. Rashawn Ray, aiming to speak truth to power, and this is my daily thought. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. See, if you have a problem with Colin Kaepernick, other NFL players, high school players, sitting or kneeling in silent protest against injustices in our country, but you don't have a problem with what people have actually used the American flag for. And if you actually paid attention to those images, some of them span starting in 1976 up to the present. And for most of you, unless you know about the specific incidents, you can't actually tell the differences between the years. See, that's one of the problems with our country about how far we've supposedly came and yet how far we still have to go. So in the span of 40 years, from that image of the man in 1976 in Boston stabbing a black man with the American flag, protesting, busing, and integration of schools, we got to think, that's 22 years after Brown versus Board of Education, after schools are supposed to be desegregated, right? And we still see the continuation of that. I mean, in fact, some schools in certain states weren't desegregated until the 1980s. And one of the things we got to remember about that, when that happened in the early 1980s, we instantly went into another period of hyper level of racial and class segregation. Well, now we see not only segregated neighborhoods that are more racially segregated today than they were in 1980, but correspondingly, we see schools that are segregated by race and by social class, because obviously most people go to local schools. So if your neighborhood is segregated, then your schools are also going to be segregated. And the problem, see, is that if we really think about it and really put this in context, what we see this happening in schools are children being suspended, right? 7-year-olds being suspended for throwing temper tantrums and crying, right? We're seeing kids thrown around classrooms. Even in my hometown of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, we saw a group of kids within the past year arrested in school for not breaking up a fight outside of school. And see, part of that narrative that people don't get, see, is that these are black kids that I'm talking about, right? Is that in this context, some people feel that it's only black people's responsibility to care about black communities, right? So the outrage after the incident, where people show up to a church, there were all black people there. So for people who supposedly care about everybody, tell me why that church, that room where reporters were there, where people were trying to figure out, where city officials were there, where the police was there, why there were only black residents and citizens of Murfreesboro sitting in that church if we supposedly care about all kids, right? But see, when we look at the data, what we actually see is that black kids are much more likely to be suspended than white kids and individuals of other races for doing the same types of acts. See, that's what people don't get. See, we're not talking about kids engaging in different types of acts. We're talking about them doing the same types of behaviors. For the most part, the same types of behaviors, right? And I'm not sure what preschoolers could do to get arrested or suspended from school, right? Where there shouldn't be some sort of intervention that maybe we don't need to arrest a 7-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, right? But instead, that's what's happening, right? This is what's happening around our country. So, I mean, as we kind of put this in context, I mean, it also makes me think about the incident with the student who was arrested for making a clock. I mean, here's this kid being creative, and he brings a clock to school, and because teachers are perceiving him to be a terrorist of some sort, when he's simply a U.S. citizen being in school, all of a sudden we see this kid arrested, right? And so, I mean, these are the sorts of incidents that we see playing out, right? Where unfortunately children are having to grow up and their innocence is having to be taken away from them. And part of this speaks to two social psychological concepts that I want to bring attention to. First is cognitive dissonance. See, we are giving people evidence, empirical evidence, backed up by years of research, objective research, that our country is unequal. But some people just can't filter that into their minds, right? Part of that is because psychologically, when you experience cognitive dissonance, when you get new information, you actually aren't able to process that new information. And instead, you simply go back to those same social scripts or stereotypes or narratives you have about a particular group. You actually can't see reality, right? So in that case, your perception becomes your reality, right? This is why perceptions is so important. This is why I study social psychology, because even though you are showing someone, in this case, that the sky is blue, they think that the sky is red, right? And it's only so much we can do to help them to realize that the sky is actually blue, right? But I think that that is something that we have to continue to pursue. The other thing that happens is what we call subjective uncertainty, right? This is what happens when because you've had limited interactions with people from a particular group, then you put on them stereotypes and social scripts about how they behave and about what they do. So what that means in this context is that if you hear about an incident of a black kid getting arrested in school or a black kid getting shot on the street, then you instantly think, oh, they were probably doing something really wrong, right? And then this is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. Then when you find out objectively that they weren't doing anything that would lead to them getting arrested or getting killed, you actually can't process that, right? You actually can't let that filter into your brain that could be a possibility, that these kids actually didn't do anything wrong, right? Or that people who are saying that they are oppressed actually are oppressed, right? And so I want to end with two quotes from veterans that I think is pretty important here. One, a black veteran who said, "This is how I drive back home because I fear dressed as a civilian." Because I fear dressed as a civilian, if I get pulled over, I may die. I mean, that's deep. So he continues to wear his army fatigues, right? I think when he's going to and fro, right? And here's a military officer, right? The other one is from a Korean War veteran who said, "It's easy to smile and wave flag and look the other way. It's much harder to stand up for justice." Yeah, that's true. So conversations matter like Black Lives and books, and I hope this has sparked one.